Alrighty. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our presentation from theory to praxis, centering anti-racism as a mindset. My name is Natalie Natal, and I am a Guided Pathways Regional Coordinator serving the Los Angeles and Orange County region at the Foundation for California Community Colleges. The foundation is a trusted partner of the California Community College system and whose main purpose is designed to benefit, support, and enhance the missions of the California Community Colleges. Our unit with the Foundation Success Center supports all 116 California Community Colleges with guided pathways implementation. I am so honored to be joined by my partner, Catherine Bergman, who will now introduce herself. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Dr. Natal. Hi, I'm Catherine Bergman, a Guided Pathways Regional Coordinator serving the 28 colleges of the San Francisco Bay Area. We would really be honored and love to know who's joining us here today and how you serve students. In the chat, would you be so kind to introduce yourself, sharing your name, your organization, and your role?
Who do we have?
My chat is silent, Natalie. Oh, here we go. Melinda, hi. On our team, the Guided Pathways implementation team. Oh, wow, Amy, David, Angela. Hi, Angela. Oh, Dr. English. Oh, wonderful. Matthew. Oh, it's so good to see all of these names and faces. Oh, wonderful. Lily, Malia, wonderful. Thank you each. So excited to see a wide variety of educational leaders joining today. We also welcome your questions in the chat throughout, and we hope to respond towards the end of our session. If not, we'll work to answer each question via a frequently asked question document and place that document in our resource drive that we're sharing with each of you via the following bit.ly link, bit.ly/centering AR_IED. And Dr. Natal will share that kindly in the chat so you all have access to everything that we're sharing today. Also, throughout this presentation, you'll see a number of links that are provided in the chat as additional resources or part of our research. Please note that all articles and videos referenced in the presentation and these links are provided in the bit.ly link as well. Today we hope, I'm so sorry, next slide, please. Today we hope that everyone will be able to join in our learning from the California Community College faculty and staff engaged in anti-racist work, including gaining shared understanding of the meaning of anti-racist, some concrete strategies to ensure that our efforts do no further harm to racially minoritized students, faculty, and staff within our communities, practical anti-racist models for your community used to dismantle racialized practices and processes, and access to some mindset shifting professional development approaches and tools to redesign any discipline's curriculum to be more inclusive. Next slide, please. In gathering learning, Dr. Natal and I were quite honored to learn from colleagues, including faculty and staff from Long Beach City College, San Diego City College, Coastline College, and Foothill College. And I may have a slight lag on my video, so I'm not seeing those logos, but those will be included in your deck. Thank you, perfect. I appreciate it, Ryan. Next slide, please. As we share the process and practices of these college communities, we seek to ground our work in the significant responsibilities students, faculty, and staff felt to respond to white supremacy and bias within themselves, their organizations, and our communities. Many of the students, faculty, and staff we get to work with and learn from each day spoke of their long-term anti-racist work in higher education and their communities, while others spoke of their anger, awareness, and engagement after the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. Next slide, please.
So there has never been a more applicable time to address centering anti-racism at our institutions, given where we are presently in our country. We can look no further than what is happening in the Black and AAPI community. While the topic of anti-racism has been around for some time, post-George Floyd, there has been an exponential increase in the number of Americans trying to understand anti-racism and what it means to be anti-racist. The conversation was further amplified with the myriad of stories on Twitter under the hashtag Black in the Ivory, where Black students, professors, and researchers shared their heartbreaking stories and illustrations on the many ways that academia is rife with racism. Next slide, please. But what we found is that while educators want to learn more and do this work, they don't know how or where to start. What does being anti-racist look like for me in my work as an arts instructor, as an admissions counselor, or as an administrator? And what does it really mean to be anti-racist?
Dr. Natal and I began our inquiry in early 2020 as we watched the Academy begin to respond more significantly to the pandemic, as well as long-term and continuous acts of white violence against Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. A key question Dr. Natal asked was how? How do we bring anti-racist and anti-bias theory into practice? From our interviews with community, college, faculty, and staff, and review of the work of other researchers, we were drawn to the power of empathy in college teams and student stories. We observed those interviewed being and becoming aware of what they and their college community members, students, faculty, staff, and others experience. Seeing particularly students as full, whole human beings with complex stories. Full stories of humans learning, loving, and working to support themselves and those they care for in the world, deeply impacted by white supremacy, patriarchy, and other oppressive biases. Some of those we interviewed also recognized and worked to ensure their colleges became places where grappling with the harm and troubled knowledge of oppression is modeled. Here, strategic empathy of those leading complex conversations about oppression becomes critical, ensuring not just diversity, equity, and inclusion, but the belonging needed to move from them to us. Next slide, please.
Oh no, it's
Accordingly, I'm so very sorry.
Oh no, we've been one ahead, so
back one slide. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah.
Oh, I apologize.
No worries.
Thank you. That one's perfect, Dr. Gonzalez. Thank you. Accordingly, we believe we must bring our full selves and employ empathy and strategic empathy to do this work in ourselves, as well as create learning environments of belonging for our communities. And this reinforces that the ability to understand and share the feelings of another is truly our superpower. Next slide, please.
So before we take you through some emerging practices taking place at different colleges that we have worked with, we want to have some language norming on anti-racism. Next slide. Dr. Robert Patterson, a professor of African American Studies at Georgetown University, says, anti-racism is an active and conscious effort to work against the multidimensional aspects of racism. A lot of times, people tend to think that racism is overt in nature and intentional, but a lot of times racism is unconscious, covert, and unintentional, and can be seen in just regular daily activities such as meetings, tenure review, hiring practices, and even in our syllabi. So we need to be able to first shift our thinking on what racism is in order to be anti-racist. Next slide. And if we as educators want to engage in this work, we have to, as author Ijeoma Oluwa puts it, commit to fight racism wherever you find it, including yourself. Next slide.
We are mindful from our Guided Pathways redesign technical assistance and our research and lived experience in higher education of the existence and impact not only of such clear or obvious examples of racism, but of subtle and hidden racism within our systems, processes, and practices acting to maintain the status quo of power in our nation and the world. Accordingly, our systems will continue to recapitulate such oppression, particularly white supremacy and bias, without collective anti-racist work. Despite a new federal administration, we are very mindful of the role of white supremacy in tax, ongoing state legislated voter suppression, and other efforts to remove disparate impact protection from American civil rights. We recognize the work we observed faculty and staff engaged in to root out racism and bias individually and from their institutions must both continue and scale. Next slide, please. In understanding racism, we are deeply grateful for the National Equity Project and their lens of oppression, which clarifies the layers of oppression, including race-based forms such as individual racism and bias, where a person may be conscious and unconscious, externalized and internalized. For example, an educator that wrongly believes Black students are not STEM pathway material and teaches according to that bias. Systemic racism in multiple forms, including institutional racism, where our organizational policies and practices perpetuate racialized oppression. For example, college policies which correlate to fewer Black high school students in dual enrollment and more of those enrolled experiencing academic probation. And structural racism, where here the effects of individual and systemic radicalized oppression interact and accumulate across institutions in history. For example, the disproportionate student loan burdens upon Black students, particularly Black women. Gaining shared understanding of racism's forms, including contextualized examples, was cited as critical to moving forward into action.
Next slide, please. So it should also be noted that while someone may not be racist, it does not mean that they are anti-racist. Being an anti-racist educator is really about your actions. It requires a conscious decision to actively confront and challenge racism whenever and wherever you see it in an effort to promote equity. So if you're anti-racist, you're examining your hiring practices at your institution. If you're anti-racist, you are actively working to decolonize your curriculum to ensure that it is equity-minded and culturally affirming. If you're anti-racist, you're ensuring that public statements from your institutions on racially charged instances, such as with the George Floyd incident, are not just performative with symbolic support and condemnation, but action-oriented. And we get it. This is really, really hard work. But to really, truly be anti-racist requires you to self-reflect. It requires you to be courageous. It requires you to be vulnerable, to refrain from knee-jerk defensiveness, and to be able to sit with a little bit of discomfort. But it also means that we are, as the late Congressman John Lewis famously said, getting into good trouble to move this work forward. Next slide.
Thank you, Dr. Natal. I apologize that my internet connection is slightly unstable, and please do raise a hand or give a shout if I'm not able to be heard. With all of this information in mind, of norming, of what anti-racism is and what it means to be anti-racist, we want to share with you what community colleges in California have been doing so you can get an understanding of what it looks like in practice. So sorry, my apologies. First, we would love a chance to learn from each of you about what you're thinking about such good trouble that Dr. Natal mentions. Using Jamboard, we hope to create a community space for sharing. When shared, please feel free to open and click through to the Jamboard. The first slides will show you how to use Jamboard if this is a new technology for you. The bar to the left is like a control or dashboard, and it'll allow you to create a post-it or a text box to add your comments. We hope that you could take a few minutes now to share what might employing an anti-racist mindset mean for you in your role at the college. And so I just want to make sure everyone, yes, thank you, Dr. Natal, for the link. And if everyone is able to open and go on to that Jamboard, wonderful. And again, the first page has some brief instructions, and the second page would be a space that we welcome folks to add what they think employing an anti-racist mindset might mean in your role at your college or organization.
So we'll have a few minutes for this activity for people to add their post-its to slide 2. Is everyone able to access the Jamboard?
Dr. Natal, I do see 18 folks in there. And to get to the second tab or Jamboard, you would just use the arrows at the top of the screen to move right and left through the series. And if anyone's having any challenges, please feel free to drop it in the chat or unmute yourself. Oh, here come the stickies.
I love to see when the stickies get added. really love these comments, calling out microaggressions and using the situation as a learning moment. Awesome. Not being afraid to speak out.
Oh, they're all coming in. Oh, you guys, thank you. There's such a broad thank you to whomever is erasing. Thank you.
That was me.
Such a broad, a broad collection of both individual, holding myself accountable, speaking up, calling in, calling out, listening, mindfulness, asking difficult questions. And a lot of these are acknowledging, that one particularly, different positional authorities. You know, we operate in a hierarchy, and so it is sometimes hard to do those things. I really appreciate that acknowledgement. Asking what else is possible instead of doing what is always done. Oh, I'm so appreciative of this. This document and all of its slides will be shared. And what's lovely is it's anonymous unless you choose not to be anonymous. So there's a chance to read through this community's different ideas and thoughts as we progress and then as you go on. Thank you so very much. Dr. Natal, were there any others that spoke to you strongly?
Yeah, what I gather from a lot of these responses is, kind of like what I was referring to earlier, which is, this idea of like, having courage. And a lot of these responses require, courage. And so I'm just loving that overall theme of what I'm seeing. So that's really, really great. And I would ask if everyone could keep the Jamboard open, because we're going to use other pages for other like future mini activities. So you don't have to keep on closing it out and opening it up again. Awesome. All right. So now that we went through our norming on what anti-racism is and what it means to be anti-racist, we want to share with you what community colleges in California have been doing so you can get an understanding of what it looks like in practice. Also, please note in the bit.ly link we provided, we also included the full interviews with the various leaders at the colleges. And so, because of course we can't show you all the videos today as much as we would love to, but if anything really resonated with you, please feel free to check out those videos in its entirety. I highly encourage you to listen to the interviews so you can hear from your peers in their own words on what they are doing. So we're just gonna provide a synthesis for you. Next slide, please. In a brief authored by key community college leaders in California that highlighted the many ways that racism can show, up at our colleges. This can range anywhere from students feeling unwelcome or invisible in student groups, as well as in the classroom, hostile language or tone from the campus staff, inequities in funding practices, and instances of microaggressions. However, the main area that college leaders see racism and bias is in hiring, promotion, performance evaluations, and just an overall lack of faculty diversity. So this just gives you an at-a-glance view on just some of the ways that racism can appear on our campuses. And as you review the information from this article, I highly encourage you to think about your institution and how you might be able to explore this data further through the lens of your own campus. Next slide, please. While the Chancellor's Office has always emphasized the need for this work, in 2020, they issued a call to action implementing DEI plans, auditing campus climate in classrooms, and redesigning administrative justice curriculum. One example of how an institution is addressing anti-racism is with Coastline College. They developed an equity audit for departments to closely examine outcomes, especially with marginalized groups. This type of data deep dive had never been done before. And what they found is that they realized that they were doing a great job of intrusive advising, and those that are being served well. However, it was only happening with certain student populations. There were a clear pattern of access and exclusion that were consistently serving certain student populations, but not Black and Latinx students. So through the audit, they were forced to ask themselves, why are certain student populations showing up and some are not? What is it about our policies and procedures that are hindering marginalized students from taking advantage of programs such as EOP&S, scholarships, the food pantry, among others? This was a tangible way to explore the data and create an action plan to address. Catherine? No. Oh, I think she might have had a poor connection and she dropped. So no worries at all. In spring 2020, Foothill College Student Services team responded to national white supremacy violence and regional shelter in place. Building on college Black Lives Matter work, they created a division-wide Black Lives Matter statement and then engaged in an anti-racist design cycle. Next slide, please. Here, Dr. Scolari, Associate Vice President of Student Services, details their team inquiry, which guided their Black Lives Matter action plan.
Thank you, Dr. Natal. My apologies to lose internet. Here is Dr. Lori Scolari, an Associate Vice President of Student Services, detailing their team inquiry, which guided their BLM plan.
I don't think we have the audio. Okay, can we, unfortunately, can we move to the next slide?
Thank you, Ryan. Long Beach City College faculty and staff are also engaged in anti-racist work as part of a larger diversity, equity, and inclusion effort at both their college and in their community. Instructional faculty reviewed confidential course success data, audited their curriculum and classrooms, and made changes to their course outlines and outcomes, syllabi, materials, assignments, assessments, as well as teaching strategies. After PD sessions and assignments, faculty members demonstrated their successful adoption of equity-minded practices to their cohort, to the curriculum committee, to academic senate, and to the state's colleges via the Chancellor's Office webinar series. All interviewees viewed their dissemination efforts as critical to engaging all instructional disciplines, as well as counseling and student service divisions. LBCC's efforts modeled the importance of leadership support for inclusive anti-racist PD approaches, including the funding of full and part-time faculty. The LBCC integration of the cultural audit into their guided pathways redesign demonstrated the GP's framework potential to be also an anti-racist tool. We were strongly struck by STEM instructional faculty's reported note of their experience, particularly incorporating empathy into early pandemic months. Faculty saw the difference in how they brought their whole selves, and they were able to see and support students as whole beings. Next slide, please.
So as this presentation states, we want to be able to go from theory to praxis. So now we would like to present you with some actual case studies that were taken from one of my favorite books, From Equity Talk to Equity Walk by Tia Brown McNair, Estella Benjamin, and Lindsay Malcolm Picue. We will present you with highlights from 2 situations at a college and ask you to use the Jamboard that was provided earlier to post how you and your institution might respond. So let's get started. Next slide, please. So here is our first case study. It was the first meeting of a team of 10 instructors and administrators who had been asked by the college president to lead their campus equity scorecard initiative. At the meeting, the group was presented with course level data for English and math courses that showed racial gaps in which students earned a grade of C or higher. One of the team members objected to the focus on race and ethnicity. He said, "It is well established that inequality is a problem of socioeconomic status. Why are we looking at race? I am sure that we would see the same gaps for poor whites." So if you were in this meeting, how might you respond to that statement? Please enter your responses in the Jamboard slide 3, and you will have 4 minutes to respond. These are some really, really great responses. Thank you so very much for all of these really fantastic responses. I really want to read all of them in detail, but some of the ones that I saw already are just are really great. You know, in addition to you know what you all have outlined in your responses, overall, it's just really important to note that, oh, I'm sorry, next slide, please. It's really important to note that insisting on socioeconomic status deflects the conversation on race, which is rooted in the notion of colorblindness. Acknowledging race, unlike income, is visible to the eye. And as such, whether we like it or not, we make judgments consciously or unconsciously based on what we see. Second, data on income disputes the reliance purely on socioeconomic status to explain outcomes, as it disregards the double burden of poverty that a number of minoritized individuals face. And so, as stated in the book, addressing racial inequity is therefore an act of justice that demands system-changing responses and explicit attention to structural inequality and institutionalized racism. Next slide, please. To further reiterate the point on why it is so important to call out race in this work, let's review comprehensive data analysis by researchers at Stanford, Harvard, and the Census Bureau of the impacts of race on socioeconomic outcomes. The data revealed race and gender to be far more predictive than socioeconomic status. For example, white boys who grow up rich are likely to remain that way. In contrast, Black boys raised in the United States, even in the wealthiest families and living in the affluent neighborhoods, earned less in adulthood than white males with similar backgrounds. Gaps based on race persisted even when Black and white boys grew up in families with the same income, family structures, education levels, and accumulated wealth. Finally, researchers noted that the disparities can't be explained by differences in cognitive ability, which is an ongoing argument made by people who cite racial gaps in test scores that appear for both Black boys and girls, and for Black girls in wealthy families who have low test scores that did not experience the same socioeconomic loss as they became women. Here, quantitative data shows a fuller story, in this case of Black boys and men, and it also serves to counter and disprove the narratives or stories we often believe we know and we tell ourselves and others. Particularly in our data analysis upon which our organizations and systems rely, we must work to see the whole person and the whole story.
Next slide, please. As our colleges respond to the call to action for the California community colleges, the next experience might sound familiar and be one you've faced. During a project supported by the Ford Foundation and the Gates Foundation, as well as the Center for Urban Education, worked with the Equity Scorecard and Colorado community colleges. Through methods of participatory critical action research, the math department at the Community College of Aurora was engaged in a variety of inquiry activities to help them see that their work practices were racialized. One of the inquiry activities focused on the hiring of math faculty. In answering the question, how do you hire faculty? And by breaking the routine practice of hiring into the most minute details, the chair of the math department, Mr. James Gray, realized that in the 10 years he served as chair, he had not hired a single African-American professor. Reasons for this included the structure of the hiring, with explicit and implicit rules, the external community he relied on to identify candidates for hiring, which consisted of an all-white network of math department chairs, and the artifacts that were integral to the hiring process, including the interview guides. Through processes that he took for granted, and he never examined through the lens of racial equity, Dr. Gray was effectively ensuring that there were no African-American candidates in the candidate pool. If you were in this meeting, how might you respond to this same instance? Please feel free to go through to the Jamboard slide 4. Dr. Natal, thank you for the music. I'm also very, very thankful for these beautiful and thoughtful responses. I very much want to honor the one that notes an echo chamber. We as the community college folks are often marginalized by four-year universities. And so we're a strong club or team, but that can also be a double-sided coin. We can neglect to open our doors to other systems and organizations that could bring more diversity to our tables. And so I really want to note and respond to folks noting, seeking networks of practitioners of color, of professors of color, of those who have expertise, conducting of reviews, even of all the different types of hiring that are done, to see what is going on there and what has been institutionalized intentionally or unintentionally. I really think that this is a good collection of really good ideas of how to approach this challenge. Beautiful.
Next slide.
Yes, please. Thank you for all these great responses. The initial process that the math department chair saw in reflection and then sought to change was one of embedded bias and privilege, as well as a deficit mindset. To respond to their departmental discovery, the math department sought to dismantle their existing practices with a hiring process which worked with an asset-based mindset to acknowledge the privileges and barriers their candidates held and faced, including changing the network used to generate the pool, and centering the students as they asked the candidates to interview, including changing their processes and the questions they asked. As stated in From Equity Talk to Equity Walk, we have been taught to understand racism as something that puts others at a disadvantage, but we are not taught to see how the privilege accrued by whiteness produces advantages. Next slide, please.
So this is a great segue to talk about anti-racism in the classroom and what that looks like. There is a misconception that you can be culturally relevant and anti-racist in subjects such as English and history, political science. But when it comes to certain areas like STEM, you do not have that flexibility. It is what it is. But what we offer to you today are two instructors, one science and one math, who are being extremely intentional about cultivating an anti-racist mindset in their curriculum. Next slide. Some of you may ask, well, what does racism in the classroom look like? As mentioned earlier, it's not always the most overt actions. It can be the lack of diversity in classroom materials. It can be the use of coded language, such as inner city, at risk, low achieving, language deficient, or perpetuating the pull yourself up by the bootstraps ideology that places achievement or lack thereof squarely at the feet of our students and not a shared responsibility with the institution. It can be a propensity to call on some students, but not others, or not being cognizant of religious holidays when scheduling exams or major assignments. Next slide. So allow me to introduce to you today, Dr. Rob, Professor of Mathematics at San Diego Community College, who also happens to be a DJ. So he's already a cool person and a cool professor. Dr. Rob's approach to math instruction is to humanize the experience by bringing empathy and feelings of empowerment to combat math anxiety. Part of that empowerment is also rooted in his emphasis on peer learning. He also spends time focusing on creating community with students and going over services that are available so students are fully aware. In his first week, he doesn't even talk about math. He talks about how they can access tutoring services, food, scholarships, mental health resources, and the like. By centering his students and validating who they are and what they bring to the classroom, many of his students who may not have been as great in math end up doing really well and in turn are able to help other students. So in this short video clip, you get to see Dr. Rob in action as he does introductions with his students in the first week. Next slide. And I pray it works.
So I want to share a little clip of what I do on, with all of my classes every day. I call it a roll call practice, where I have my students share their name the way they want it said and their goals and their dreams in a very commanding, I am a future college graduate, or I am a future lawyer. So I'd love for you to hear that. And let me just make sure I'm sharing the sound so that you can hear.
Nemo, I'm a future business owner.
All right.
My name is Neshma and I'm a future dentist. My name is Ayan and I'm a future nursing.
My name is Victoria and I'm a future UCSD graduate.
My name is Calvary and I'm a future lawyer.
My name is Melanie and I'm a future business owner.
My name is Ibrahim. I'm a future ER physician.
Yep.
My name is Isaiah. I'm a future UCLA graduate.
What's up?
My name is Shania, and I'm a future epidemiologist in a Range Rover on my way to my house for a bedroom.
Period.
My name is Jonathan. I am a future cannabis distributor, dispensary owner, and farmer.
My name is Marie, and I'm a future social worker.
My name is Faida and I'm a future civil engineer.
Oh, my name is Jamie, and I'm a future neonatal nurse.
My name is Lakayla, and I'm a future psychologist.
My name is Dejane, and I'm a future nurse in emergency medicine.
Period, Pooh.
My name is Shay and I'm a future boss.
She's a future boss, and I love it. As you can see, Dr. Rob sets the frame to humanize his students and build community while leading with empathy to ensure his students can feel safe and thrive. This was also validated by Dr. Victor Rios, who recently spoke at Contra Costa's Community College District Spring Pedagogy Conference. He mentioned the importance of emotional support that he cited from a recent study where students of color reported that they desire a lot more emotional support from instructors as opposed to middle-class white students that desire more informational support. Next slide.
Our interviews with Long Beach City College. Oh, one slide back, please. Our interviews with Long Beach City College STEM faculty also shared actionable learning. Priscilla Bravo Arias, assistant professor of microbiology, spoke of her experience in STEM education and workforce as a BIPOC woman, the impact of faculty mentoring on her achievement, and her desire to share the lessons of her lived experience. With the support of her president and department, Professor Arias worked to redesign her curriculum based on the cultural audit, including ensuring the relevancy of her curriculum to students by featuring BIPOC scientists, researchers, and participants, and making clear connection to the COVID pandemic and other challenges the students faced. Also, central to curriculum became inclusion and consideration of racism in the historic and current study and practice of STEM. Specifically, she cited historic research exploitation of BIPOC community members, as well as the STEM sector's failure to provide hospitable workplaces for BIPOC employees, particularly caregivers. Finally, her curriculum recognized the power of STEM to address racism, including access to universal health care, decreased BIPOC maternal mortality, and global access to COVID vaccines. As with her colleagues, Professor Arias spoke in the quote we share of the impact on her students, their retention and success, and her own satisfaction as a STEM educator when she applied empathy in her classroom's design and instruction. We look forward to more data from the faculty engaged in cultural audit redesign as part of Guided Pathways at LBCC to share the power of empathy on student success. Next slide, please. In our review of interview experiences, their notes and transcripts and videos, Dr. Natal and I were struck by the powerful emerging faculty and staff approaches. Next slide, please. We have endeavored to synthesize these promising practices into emerging anti-racist design principles, including efforts must honor BIPOC students, faculty, and staff, and do no further harm. Storytelling and data collection can cause fatigue and trauma. For example, poverty porn and the Oppression Olympics. First, let's look at the data and, if possible, respond to that we already have. Use great care and intention when requesting new data and feedback. Understand and learn from prior anti-racist efforts within your college, very often long-term and unrecognized work of BIPOC students, faculty, and staff. We found that support for ongoing professional learning environment was also critical. Leaders were needed to model and prioritize the participation for all college community members. Normalize what to do when you don't know and ensure a culture of taking responsibility of mistakes with humility and courage from these leaders was also critical. And importantly, college-wide training and resources around empathy and strategic empathy as a tool to support the community to address harms and troubled knowledge or shame from racism and bias. We also saw great success in those approaches that acknowledge differentiated experience. With the diversity of lived experience and trauma at our colleges, across our students, faculty, and staff, as well as differences between disciplines and divisions, PD must acknowledge this context and work to deepen cross-campus respect. All efforts must see each participant as a full being within the college community. The differences for each person in terms of racism and biases harm to them and/or their troubled knowledge requires the use of strategic empathy. We also saw great impact with professional development and approaches at the college that respond to the whole student in the college learning environment. We saw powerful, empathetic, and humanistic approaches which met BIPOC students holistically And then they soared in terms of student retention and college sustainability. Such honoring of the whole student with integrated student supports, particularly basic needs and tech equity from across the campus into the classroom, bolsters student experience and success. Finally, and importantly, our college interviewees work to ensure accountability in process, action, and outcomes. All the campuses shared the need to reflect and then get to action. They established timelines while committing to continuous improvement and next steps. Next slide, please.
So in summary, the purpose of this presentation was to highlight some of the emerging practices that are happening right now at our community colleges in California with respect to addressing equity and anti-racism. While we don't have data to show how this has improved, what we do know is that through the work of these colleges, they are centering their students as demonstrated with the equity audits conducted at Coastline College and LBCC, and then applied in the classroom at San Diego Community College and Long Beach City Community College. It is okay if the change begins just where you are, at your desk, meaning you don't have to wait for the whole department to be on board. You can be the change. While you may not be able to copy exactly what they are doing, the hope is that these practices are able to spark something, an idea for you so that you can bring this to your institution. You need to closely examine your data and not be afraid to talk about race, to address system racial inequities and be specific with your actions and at your respective institutions, as was demonstrated with Foothill College, and then regularly evaluate with your students, faculty, and staff. As we mentioned earlier in this presentation and also heard in the opening remarks this morning from Monica Lozano, we need to be able to lead with courage, especially when we are approaching issues with equity and anti-racism. It also requires, as we mentioned earlier, to lead with empathy and seeing each other as human beings, especially in our students. Next slide.
My apologies, Dr. Natal. To be of service to you and your college communities, we would like to share with you resources we've gathered from the students, faculty, and staff of the California community colleges that we are honored to work with, as well as our colleagues and partners at the Foundation for California Community Colleges and the System Office, including all our full interviews with the college teams and the tools that they used and developed to conduct audits. Resources we're grateful to have drawn upon for this presentation and the preparation of our interview questions, and the Google Jamboards from our interactive session today. We hope these resources will be of service to you and your anti-racist work with your college and community.
Next slide. And our last slide. It is our sincerest hope that some of our stories, some of these stories from our colleges can serve as a spark for you to take something back to your institution. On behalf of my partner, Catherine, and I, as well as all of the fantastic Guided Pathways regional coordinators in the state of California that are fiercely committed to this work, we thank you so much for being with us today and giving us the opportunity to present with you today, and also giving us grace in the midst of our technical difficulties. So at this time, we will entertain any questions that you may have for us. And if there's any questions, because we know that we ran out of time, feel free to put them in the chat. We could add our answers like in the Google, in our Google resources as well.